It's finally fucking here. College football is here, and I am doing a season preview show. Yes, I know week 0's already happened. Let's face it. The season doesn't actually start until week 1, and so I'm having some guests on to just talk about college football DFS because I swear to God, this shit is going to grow. And so what we are here to talk about is some college football DFS, just some general college football and everything you need to know, whether you're new to it, whether you're an intermediate or an expert. I think you're going to find some stuff on this video that you're going to find useful for this season, right? I have my dude, GSD4, aka Galen, the #1 rated player in RGs last year. I have my dude, Matt Gajewski from Stochastic, who knows more about this sport than probably any human being alive. And then I have Kenny, aka Hamhock41, one of the top college football DFS players out there, all to share their opinions and their insights on college football DFS. So buckle up, enjoy the show. All right, here we go. Our very first guest, a man who goes, his name's Galen. You will say it correctly, pal. He is GSD4. If you play college football DFS and you've never seen him, then you have not played college football DFS, as he was the #1 rated player last year on the Roto Grinders rankings, and he is coming on my show to get us ready for the preview for college football DFS. Let's get some insight from a guy who I would say probably plays a fair amount of volume if he's the #1 player in college football DFS. Galen, what is up, my brother?
What's going on, man? Thanks for having me on. Always a good time.
So college football DFS, I am insistent that this sport is going to grow. I will put whatever little influence I have to grow this damn sport. I'm glad to see, unabated getting into it. I think that's going to grow the market. Even getting people into props will get people into DFS. You got some of the big tout sites are bringing people in to now push it to their crowd. I think that this is the year we finally see college football DFS grow, because honestly, do you agree with the statement that in theory, college football DFS, even with some states not having it legalized, should be probably the second biggest DFS sport, only behind NFL, as people fucking love college football?
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty big. I don't think it's going to be the second biggest, because I think at the end of the day, I think it's a little bit too difficult with just how many teams and how many news and the lack of reporting and stuff. I think golf, honestly, is like the perfect DFS sport. Once a week you set your lineups, you fire them in. I know you've been crushing the golf game, so I think golf's pretty good behind NFL. But college football is just super fun, man. There's like 130 teams. I think there's a lot of edge to be had because of all the news, all the just craziness that goes on. So I think it's going to grow a lot. And like ETR is getting into it. Some other sites are getting into it. Run Pure, I think, is going to do some stuff. I think they brought on some guys there to do some content. So everyone seems to be getting into the college football DFS streets all of a sudden. So it strikes me I was honestly a little bit surprised, but I hope this grows the prize pools, and I think it will.
Yeah, growing the contest and the pool of cash games, because in my opinion, college football cash is literally, both figuratively and literally money, right? And so, like, the more people that can get into it, the better it is for people that just play the best plays. It's pretty simple at college football DFS. So I think the first thing we got to start is I would guess 90% of people that we're going to get into college football DFS are coming from the NFL streets. So, like, if you were trying to sell somebody on like college football DFS, what would you do to try to an NFL DFS guy to try to get him over to college football DFS? Give me your best sales pitch.
Well, my best sales pitch is pretty easy, just more touchdowns. You've got games with like 80-point totals. Like scoring is crazy. I don't think it's like you can be like, in a head-to-head and you can be down 40 points going into the last game. You have one wide receiver left. You're not dead. Whereas in NFL, you're probably pretty dead. So it's just, I think, a lot more fun. Just the volatility is ramped up to 1 million, and it's just more fun. That's my biggest selling point. It's just way more fun than the NFL. Some of these totals literally go up to 80. So some of these games are going into shootouts. Overtime is more fun. Just the whole thing is just more fun.
Some of the usage for some of these teams is just insane. You'll literally have some running backs get 38 carries.
Yeah. You have quarterbacks out there that are projected for like 40% of the carries.
Right.
I do my own projections for college football, so literally have quarterbacks projected for 40% of the carries and 100% of the passes. These guys are doing everything out there. So there's like some really good DFS plays because of that.
So, like, the one thing that I never hear people talk about is in the NFL, the very worst cornerback that starts in the NFL is not that far behind the very best wide receiver. The talent gap is much thinner in the NFL. But in college football, you will see some top-end wide receivers literally be gods playing just against peasants from another team at corner. And that skill gap leads to ginormous advantages in exploiting matchups that I don't think you see in the NFL near as much. You agree with that hot take?
Yeah, I think just the quality of teams is so different. Like this weekend, for example, we've got USC versus San Jose State. It's like a 30-point spread. USC is just a way better team. Regardless of which way that spread goes, USC should score a lot of points. I mean, their team total is something like 50 points. So I think that presents some really interesting decisions in DFS as well. How many carries is like the first running back going to get? How many carries is the second running back going to get? A lot of these ball games just change teams week to week. I think USC is going to play completely differently in this game than they would against like Oregon or someone of closer to their caliber.
So, as a guy who's had a lot of success with college football DFS, a new guy's getting into college football DFS, and you say, hey, look, new guy, if there's one rule you got to follow, it's going to be this. Like, you got to give them one piece of advice, and there's multiple pieces of advice that they need to follow. But the biggest piece of advice you could give them, what would it be?
I think just like, try to get good content and good projections because it's completely impossible to do this by yourself. If you're trying to handle 133 teams as a one-man show, it's going to be impossible. There's news coming in from all these different beat writers, different newspapers, student newspapers, forums, all kinds of crazy stuff. I think it's just really essential to use some good projections because without projections, I think you're literally drawing dead.
Yeah, I'm not a big projection guy at PGA, but at college football, they are the end-all be-all. Like, it is the ultimate projection sport because you need somebody who is a sweaty tryhard who will go find out all this information, not just about injuries, but about the depth chart, about the carries, about everything. There's so many things, and to try to do it on your own, I mean, literally, you can't do it. And you're like, well, I mean, maybe you're a really, really, really crazy person. You can do it, but you probably couldn't even get enough money down to justify all the time that you're putting into it to do that, and you're going up against other people who probably have the same information because they have a whole community doing it. So I'm telling you, that's some great advice from my dude Glenn. All right, we already talked about this one a little bit. So, the biggest misconception was the question, but I think I'm just going to prompt you as I already know your answer. There is a big debate out there about in college football, we have a super flex, whereas in NFL, we don't have that. And the big thing about a super flex, new guy, is you can play quarterbacks, running backs, or wide receivers there, whereas in the NFL, your flex can only be a wide receiver or running back. So most people will tell you always play a quarterback in the super flex. Glenn, tell them if they're right or wrong.
I think that's a pretty big misconception. I mean, I will preface this that 90% of the time I'm going to play a quarterback in Superflex, whether it's in cash or GBPs, but every slate is going to be different. Sometimes you have these slates that are 2 or 3 games, and some of the quarterbacks are in a competition, and you don't know who's going to play. Some of these guys are just completely terrible. You've got teams that are going to run the ball 70% of the time. It's just, and sometimes last year, I think DraftKings did a pretty bad job of pricing. So last year, there was a few main slates where every single decent QB was priced like above 10K. And it was just really, really hard to play all of them. I mean, to play 2 QBs in the same lineup. So I think having any kind of rule that says like, always do this, always do that, is just never going to work out. 90% of the time, I'm going to be playing 2 QBs. But there's definitely slates where running backs are going to sneak in there. Every once in a while, wide receiver is going to sneak in there. At the end of the day, it's just how does DraftKings and FanDuel price this stuff? Because if all the QBs are priced at 12K, it's just going to be really, really hard to play 2 of them, unless you're like playing a bunch of 3K wide receivers. And at that point in time, you're just sacrificing a lot.
All right, so the next question, and this has to do with cash, because let's face it, college football cash is probably a much more sustainable thing to do than GPPs. When you're building your cash lineup, are you a hand builder type of guy, or are you an optimizer type guy when it comes to your cash lineup? And a follow-up question to that is, do you run one cash lineup, or do you run multiple cash lineups?
Man, I have forgotten how to hand build a lineup. Sometimes I'll try hand building a lineup, like when I'm registering for contests. And I'm just like, what do I do? Like, how do I do this? Like,
where do I put my hands? What do I do?
I have my projections. I hit the run button, and whatever it spits out, that's usually what I'm playing. There's definitely weeks where, I'll look at the top like 10, 20, 30 lineups and just kind of use some common sense. Sometimes there's like a 3K guy that sneaks in there that I'm like, man, this projection doesn't really make sense, or I don't really want to play this 3K guy that's projected for 4 points, regardless of what the pricing is. So I'll obviously tinker with a lot of different stuff, but it's going to be something that's close to my optimal at the end of the day, and that's the reason why I do the projections, right? Like I do the projections so I kind of have an idea of who a better play is. but yeah, I do think the cash streets are pretty good. Usually I'll play one lineup. Sometimes I'll play two. I mean, there's a lot of weeks where the decisions are just so close. I'll have some kind of 2v2, 3v3. And in those situations, I'll just kind of end up splitting it in half.
All right, so in college football, we get a variety of different slates, right? We got a 5-game slate here in week 0 that we're about to play, but normally it's a 13 or 14-game main slate over on DraftKings. But then we get into Maction, and we'll have 2- and 3-game slates in October and November. In your opinion, what is like the nuts type slate, like as far as size goes, for having, enough variety to be able to gain an edge on people, but also not just being overwhelmed with choices? Do you have like a certain amount of games? Like I always hear NBA people say like an 8-game slate. I've heard some people say a 5-game slate. Like those are the nut type slates. Do you have one? Do you have a sizing for college football?
Yeah, I think like anything between like 5 and like 10 or 5 and 11, 5 and 12 is pretty good. The smaller slates I think can be pretty good, but last year, this is just like a call to action for DraftKings. Like, please just price these slates better. Like the 2-game action slates last year, for about 3 years now, I've played like every single college football slate. And then last year, the 2-game action slate, I just couldn't do it. It was just every single person had the same exact lineup. They were just completely mispriced. So I'm really hoping that if the sport grows this year, they spend a little bit more time on the pricing. But overall, I think the main slates, they're usually like, 12, 13 games. I think those are pretty good. I actually don't think they're that overwhelming. There's like, you look at that slate, there's like 3 teams that you can quote unquote uncheck, right? Like you're just like not really playing anyone from Iowa. You're not really playing anyone from Navy or whatever. It's like super rare that there's like a guy on one of these teams with like a 10-point team total that's playable. So you can cross off some of the teams and bring it down to a little bit more manageable size. And I think those are good slates with a lot of different options.
The best part about those big slates is you get a lot more diversity in the cash game lineups, right? You don't just have in a 4-game slate. It's like you'll literally see like 70% of the field have like 7 of the same 8 guys, right? So you get a little bit more diversity. That's why I like the bigger slates, because I play more cash than GPPs, because it's just so much easier. All right, another controversial point, because people that come over from NFL, they are brainwashed into 2 things: stacking and correlation, right? Which are very, very viable strategies, proven mathematically. Now, obviously there is going to be some crossover in college football to stacking and correlation, right? If you get in a game that has, it's 45-42, you're going to want to have probably multiple pieces of that game. If you're going to have a quarterback who throws for 6 touchdowns, it might be nice to have a couple of those receivers. But do you stack as hard? Are you as a big believer in correlation and stacking in college football as you are in, say, NFL?
This is a really tough one to answer because it really, really depends on a lot of different things. In high stakes, like if I'm playing like a 12-man, or like a 15-man, I stack quite a bit because I think the correlation is definitely significant. In a vacuum, the correlation is pretty significant. In like the bigger tournaments where you have to have the nuts and there's like all these different players and all these different teams that can go for like 50 points, it's like really hard to like game stack, for example. So there, maybe I'll just stack the QB. I think the one really important thing in college football to remember is just use some common sense, right? Like if you have a quarterback that's going to be running 40% of the time, you probably don't need to stack them. If there's a team that's going to use, I think it was like Washington State last year, they were using like 6 to 7 wide receivers all the time. It's just really hard to like go in and like try to game stack a game that's using like 7 receivers on both sides. At the same time, you have teams like Tennessee last year, like Hendon Hooker was, he would run, but he was a great guy to stack. They would really only use like 2 or 3 wide receivers. So at the end of the day, my take is just like use some common sense, right? Like look at how many receivers they're using. Look at the team total. Look at the guys coming back. Sometimes there's games where like, it's a high total. Both teams use 3 wide receivers. And yeah, I want to stack that everywhere. And then there's games where like the QB is like the best play we've seen in a week. And he doesn't really pass the ball, so I'm not going to stack it. So
you guys heard it here first. Glenn said that Hendon Hooker was somebody that he liked to stack, so he was not a big fan of a naked hooker. Not a big fan of the naked hooker.
Not a fan.
All right. This is a good one, too. Are you more of a guy who likes to target games or target players, right? Because I think a lot of times people are like, oh, man, this has a 75-point total and a 3-point line. I need to just get all the pieces of this game I can. Whereas I think some people would say, I'd rather just go get these usage monsters from 7 different games. Obviously the answer is probably going to be more nuanced, where it's probably both. But if you had to pick one that you lean more on, what would it be?
Yeah, like you said, it's definitely nuanced and it's definitely both. But for me, it's definitely players. like I said, there's like we talked about this a little bit earlier. Like some of the usage stuff is just crazy, right? You have guys like what was that guy's name? Charlie something on Purdue last year. He was getting like 40% of the targets.
Jones,
yeah,
right?
that's the guy, Charlie Jones. Yeah, he was getting like 40% of the targets, right? Like I don't really care what type of game script you're in. If you're getting 40% of the targets, you're probably going to get a lot of fantasy points. At the same time, it definitely matters, right? Like if he's getting that in a 20-point team total, it's completely different than getting that in a 45-point team total. But I think compared to the NFL, I definitely care about players way more and their role way more than I do the game environment.
All right, last question, and this is, let's just get out of all the minutia of DFS strategy, and let's just talk who's a good sleeper team and or sleeper player this year that you think is going to really take off, and it could be just from overall success, or if you just want to be a huge nerd and focus on it from a DFS perspective, we can do that too. So who are you going with here?
I got a good guy. I think Joe Milton is going to be pretty fun. I've seen a lot of different chatter about him. I've seen people say like, oh, he's not even going to get drafted. I've seen people say he's going to be a top 10 NFL pick. I think he's just going to be super fun.
Why don't you tell the people? Why don't you tell the new people who that is?
Yeah, he's a quarterback for Tennessee.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I think Tennessee is just going to be a really good team. So really good team, really fun player. He can run, he can throw it deep. He's got some great wide receivers.
But he's no naked hooker. We do agree to that. Now, didn't he get a little bit of run last year? Or am I crazy? I swear
he
I remember.
Did, because the naked hooker fell and tore his ACL.
Those hookers will do that to you. You got to watch out for them. All right, so I think the last thing I'd want you guys to know about my dude Galen, and you will say his name correct. He is GSD4 on the DK streets, right? But he also is now taking his projections, because if you can't tell by listening to this guy talk, he is kind of a sweaty tryhard, and he makes his projections, but he's not putting them out there in the DFS world like most of us do with our projections. He is actually connecting them to Unabated, which is like, a really big sports betting site if you don't know about it, and you can now use his projections to get ahead of prop line bets at Underdog and Price Picks. Just a great example, because we're recording this Friday before the Ohio game, is the line open for, say, Bangora at like 47 rushing yards, and if you're looking at good projections like Galen's, then you would see, oh shit, that is a tremendous undervalue on how many yards he's probably going to get, and you can go get ahead of that line and place action on it. So Galen, I hope I described all that correctly. Is there anything you would want to add about beating prop bets with good projections and where people can find you and your product?
Yeah, so the product can be found on unabated.com/getcfb. Pretty easy to remember. Just unabated.com/getcfb. We have a lot of different stuff there at Unabated. But in terms of the prop stuff, yeah, I've been doing actually my WNBA projections on there as well. Long-time WNBA DFS player. Now we're doing the college football stuff. We just have like a big college football team at Unabated, man. We're doing a lot of cool stuff. We've got a lot of people focused on news. So I don't know if last year you remember there was like the big fantasy account that handled all the news. They're over at Unabated now. So our goal is to kind of just be the authority on college football news, college football props. We do a lot of data science stuff on the back end, just a bunch of complicated math stuff that I don't want to describe right now. But yeah, there's just like a lot of stuff going on there with the props, and I think it's just a good product.
I have two big takes from that. One, first of all, good news in college football circles is probably 80% of the battle to being good at college football DFS. And the second thing is, Galen might be the only man I've ever heard of who has the WNBA and college football DFS Venn diagram going. That has to be a very, very small crossover in this world. Do you know anybody else, Galen?
I don't think so. I think I'm the only one.
You're fucking.
Well, I might be the only one that's constantly in the WNBA street. So that in itself is a small circle.
There you go. A man of the people, grinding WNBA and college football bets for you. Galen, once again, thank you for your time. I hope that you continue to smash this year. Of course, don't beat me when you see -75. Just go ahead and toss a bum line up in that. I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on a serious note, giving me your time, giving some perspective, and hopefully growing college football DFS. I can't believe the season starts tomorrow. This is going to be so fun. Thank you again, brother.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me on.
All right, my second guest, and I got to tell you, this is a dude that, like, whenever I first started getting into college football DFS, I shouldn't say this as I'm having multiple guests on I enjoy. This was the first guy that, like, knocked my dick off. I'm like, what is this guy, and how is he such a robot that could just know all of this stuff? His name is Matt Gajewski, which I just realized I've been saying wrong, which fucking pisses me off, and he is over at Stochastic, and he might be the sharpest dude I know as far as knowing everything about college football DFS. Matt, what is up, my dude?
My man, it's good to finally chat with you. Thank you for all the kind compliments. I'm excited to chop it up with you, and I'm really excited for the season too.
Dude, this season's gonna be so fun. Look, let's just start right there. I will fully admit I am super biased, but I truly believe college football DFS can become a mega sport in the DFS space because college football is just so damn popular. And I know there's like 20 states that don't allow it, but with other people getting into this space, some of the big tout sites, people starting to run prop bets when it comes to college football, is this finally the time we see college football kind of have that breakout year and stop being a secondary DFS sport and maybe get up into that upper echelon with NBA, NFL, PGA, and sports like that? Or am I just dreaming?
I think it'll eventually get there. You bring up, I think, the biggest limitation to it, and it's the state-by-state legislation. We're seeing some of that get cleared up, and I think as sports betting becomes legal, you're going to see some changing in legislation really across the board. And I think some of that will apply to DFS down the line too. But as you well know, there's a lot of states that have weird regulations where, all right, you can't bet your hometown teams in this state. Maybe you just can't play DFS in college sports specifically, which is really annoying. But overall, I think it is growing, a lot of it having to do with the sport being super popular. We're now seeing other big DFS companies like ETR cover this. I think that's going to introduce the sport to a lot of people that are maybe daily NFL grinders, NBA grinders, PGA grinders, get their feet wet in the college streets and actually realize how good of a game it is.
So the other big limitation I would say is that like there is this perceived idea that like it's impossible to keep up with all this stuff. People think there's 130 games on every slate, which is just silly. That's not the case. And that I think that keeps a lot of people from being interested in it because they feel like I can't keep up with 32 NFL teams. How am I going to keep up with 130 college football teams? Maybe this is just me, but because I follow PGA and there is no consistent news, Rory just mystery back injury all of a sudden, I've kind of learned to live in that world, and it doesn't scare me off from DFS. Matter of fact, it makes me embrace it. I love that information is not disseminated as fairly because to me, if you're going to be a sweaty tryhard, there's even more of an edge to finding any little nugget of information you can. Am I crazy for thinking that the lack of information is actually a selling point for college football DFS?
I think you're 100% right, and I think it's a couple things. One, there's not standard injury reporting. Now, this isn't like NBA where guys are scratched every night. But it does happen probably once a week where, if I'm playing college football DFS, I want to make sure I have the opportunity to be at my computer or have some sort of plan in place where there's a swap. And, generally we know coming in who the situations might actually focus on that have this. A running back's been missing practice or got injured the week before. Without standardized injury reporting, you just might have to monitor that certain player. But for the most part, we know who it is. So it's not like the slate's getting flipped. Randomly, that'll happen, but most of the time I think we can know and then actually target specific situations because of that. But it also goes to just the data in general. The data isn't as readily available as a sport like the NFL, NBA. So there are some micro edges there too, where if you actually know the ins and outs of the teams, that helps. But one thing I'll say to people that are a little weary of the information with all 130 teams, I think there's really good resources out there. I know you and I both work really hard to know these teams in and out, to give you the best information, talk about those injury situations, and where you can take advantage of the field. So I think a lot of times, just like being in Discords, watching videos like this, you can get most of that news right away with a little bit of work on your own.
All right, I got to go off script here. I know I gave you some questions, but I got to go off script. I feel like when it comes to knowing college football teams, players, depth charts, records, all of that stuff, I've got to be in the 99.99 percentile of Americans when it comes to that. Yet when I watch you talk about this guy is a transfer from here and they had this guy and this guy last year, I'm like, this dude's you're just another level. How on earth do you possibly remember all of these guys in the depth chart and the who's playing and how many carries they got? Like, how do you do it? Because I'm really, really good at it, and I am nothing compared to you at it.
Yeah, a lot of it is just living and breathing this. And for a few years now, you kind of just develop the awareness of, all right, 5 years ago, this player started at Clemson. Now they're at Georgia Tech. Now they're at UMass. Well, I remember them when they were a recruit, and that information just kind of stays with you. But on the week-to-week stuff, when I'm making my personal videos, a lot of it is just having the data digestible in front of me. So like when I'm talking about routes and targets and who benefits in what situations, some of that is just on the back end having organized data, but a lot of it I think is just, living and breathing this for going on, half a decade now.
And by the way, just this is a personal note. I hate to get off track here, but can you please tell me OU is going to be good this year? I want to believe.
I like OU.
Thank you.
I think the price on them, people seem to just be thinking Texas is going to run away with the Big 12. I'm not entirely convinced of that. I don't know what happened to Dylan Gabriel's public perception, but I remember in 2021, this was a very good quarterback before he got injured. And then back in 2020, he had the third highest PFF passing grade of all signal colors across college football. And last year he was awesome too. I think people just remember those Davis Beville games where Oklahoma basically didn't have a quarterback.
Why would you remind me of that? You're trying to hurt me. You were trying to hurt me.
I'm trying to spin that as a positive for you. You got and plus this year you got depth. So
yeah.
God forbid Gabriel goes down, you actually have a legitimate backup signal caller. Hopefully they just don't have to revert to triple option stuff or whatever the hell they were trying to do last year when Beville played.
The whole just put a running back at quarterback against Texas. That was, oh my God. If I could just have that Men in Black thing that like makes you forget something, I would use it for that. That's the most traumatizing event of my adult life was watching that game last year. All right, we have got to say this. NFL, most of the people that we're trying to get into college football DFS are probably going to be coming from the NFL streets, right? So if these people coming over from NFL to college football DFS, what would you say is the biggest difference in college football DFS from NFL DFS? Because trying to get those people to understand that will help them adjust better to it. So what would you say it is?
I think 100% it's having a super flex where now you can roster 2 quarterbacks, whereas in NFL, you still got to do the defense roulette almost you have to do it every single week. And it's annoying. It spins slates. It does create variance, which I think helps casual players. But at the end of the day, if someone's watching your channel, they're probably a pretty decent player, pretty decent skill player. They're seeking out good information. The super flex is the biggest difference where now you can bring in 2 different stacks. You can stack a full game with quarterbacks on both sides. But I don't think that's a huge hindrance. People are already accustomed to stacking their signal caller. Now you just have the opportunity to do it twice. And as a pretty good rule of thumb, unless it's a short slate, I don't know, there's some Armed Force Academy on the slate or something like that. Generally speaking, you want to have a second quarterback in that super flex.
So you're pretty much on team 99% of the time quarterback in the super flex, right?
Yeah. The one thing I'll say about that is last year they adjusted pricing a little bit. I remember back in the day when, Jalen Hurts and Kyler and some of those quarterbacks from a few years ago at Oklahoma, they were priced around $9K flat. This year, you saw a bunch of them break that $10K threshold, and they priced running backs down a little bit. I think that was a response to the really high rate of quarterbacks in the super flex.
Right.
So when I was running my projections on the back end, I got running back in the flex more often, but it still wasn't quite as frequently where I would just abandon that heuristic. Well, generally speaking, still trying to use QB.
We're recording this on Friday. I know you're watching it on Monday, guy on YouTube. But just a perfect example. There's so many quarterbacks who I think are overpriced on this week 0 slate, but then they only put Caleb Williams, literally a god among men at college football DFS, at just 9,900. So it's even when they try to step in the right direction, Caleb Williams should probably be 11.5 on this slate. So still a little bit of work left to do for my boys at DK.
Yeah, they're working, but you're 100% right on that. I couldn't agree more.
If we're trying to get new people into college football DFS, what would be the one piece of advice? Hey, new guy, you want to play college football DFS? Take it from Matt here. What would be the one piece of advice you would give a guy trying to get into this that would help them, maybe not even necessarily find success, but just not be a complete fucking fish?
I think finding good information sources, whether that's your channel, me over at Stochastic, if you can cut out a lot of that legwork yourself, find the people that are going to do it for you, get in a good Discord. I think that's going to help you a ton because I agree with you. The biggest hindrance, I think, for people is that they're afraid of the information. And the other thing I'll say is most of the time on these slates, unless you're playing Tuesday night action or something, it's generally the Power 5 teams on the slate and the good ones at that. If you're rolling up to a Saturday slate and you want to just be a casual player, you're getting Texas every week. You're getting Bama, Clemson. They put the same teams on the slate. So you don't actually have to know that many. And again, that's assuming you're just not playing action. I'm a sicko. I'm going to play every single slate, and I love it. But for a casual player that's playing on Saturdays, I don't think it's as big of a hurdle as people might think.
Right. Which leads me to the next question. Like, there's so many people have misconceptions about college football DFS. I feel like, oh, it's this, it's that. And I think that they just don't really understand the reality. Like, the first one is just like, oh, I could never keep up with all those teams. But they forget you don't have to keep up with every one of those teams on for every Saturday. You only got to keep up with the ones on the slate. Is there like any big misconceptions that you often hear people recite on why that they're reluctant to play college football DFS?
I think the biggest one is the news. People coming from like the NBA streets, I mean, if you're on Twitter, you see these horror stories. I remember like this must have been 2 years ago now, where UCLA was playing in a week 0 game or a week 1 game, and then Zach Charbonnet was randomly out. Or maybe this was all the way back to Josh Kelly. I don't recall, but it was UCLA. And everyone on Twitter that's not playing sees that, and they don't see the other 99 instances where Josh Kelly or Charbonnet, whoever it was, plays in the game. So I think they're a little worried about that. Even though there are injuries, I don't think it happens quite as frequently as people make it out to be. And again, we usually know from the previous week, like if you're watching your channel and you're doing your streams ahead of time, your videos ahead of time, you're going to know who's injured going into the game more than likely.
Right.
And also, a few teams are actually instituting injury reporting this year. The beat reporting has gotten much better in college football, just due, I think, to the national attention it's gotten. I personally don't think the injury news is quite as big of a deal as people on Twitter and across the industry make it out to be. It is an edge, but it's pretty easy to keep on top of.
I had not heard this. These teams that are putting it out, like they're going to put out like an official, like almost inactive list. Like I assume are these some major schools or something? I had not heard this.
Purdue's doing it. I forget the other ones. It's not many.
Well,
you are giving up a competitive edge. But
the thing with Purdue, if I remember correctly, Charlie Jones doesn't get hurt until the game starts. I believe that's how it always works.
Charlie Jones is constantly hurt, but the dude is a warrior, and he's playing through it every week. Love Charlie Jones.
Yeah, he won't bitch quit on you, I'll tell you that. But there will be a good 7 minutes of the game where he's out, and then he comes back with his one leg. Guy's a trooper. And he's going to get 18 targets, so you got to play him.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about slate size, right? Because as you already said, you're a sicko and you play every single slate. And we're going to have some 2-game action slates in October and November. We have a 5-game slate this week 0, but the standard is somewhere between 12 to 14 games on the DK main slate on Saturdays, right? What do you think is like the Goldilocks zone for the perfect size slate? And why do you say that? That's what I want to know, because I go back and forth on this myself.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to just personally turn to my results, and I've had better results on the shorter slates. I think a lot of that is just because the projection sources around the industry will funnel people to the same plays, which kind of leads to these mega leverage spots. Especially in college football, there's not a lot of projection sources. So people can get groupthink and funneled to the same plays. And if you can find some leverage spots off that, the leverage can actually be really big. As far as the main slates go, I kind of take the same approach in the smaller field contests. That's where I had a lot of success last year playing the Qs and stuff to get to the college football final. And overall, I love the main slates too, but you don't have quite as much condensed ownership as you do on some of the small ones.
Dude, I love that point you made, because I remember it was a Maction slate last year. What was the team that has Maddox and Newton as the receivers? Is that Toledo? Yeah. And I remember everybody was playing Newton, so I said, you know what, I'll just go play Maddox. And the guy literally gets tackled at the 1-yard line. I saw him as in, and I ended up getting third in a GPP. And if he just sticks the fucking ball out, I win it, because I was the only person that played Maddox when everybody played Newton, right? And like you can do that in those 2 and 3 game slates and just get a mega leverage, because all it takes is one play and it can completely flip the slate your way. So, I was going to say the answer is 5, but now that you said that, maybe it is a 2 or 3 game slate. Good point.
I like 5 is good too. It's basically like smaller the better for me.
Right, exactly. And the only thing I would say positive about big slates is I feel like it gives you more of an edge at cash game, because on these 5 games or even a 2 or 3 game slate, it's like almost everybody who has a pulse is going to know that like these are the 6 must-play cash plays, and you end up getting in these cash lineups that like everybody has the exact same lineup, and it gets really annoying. Whereas on a 14-game slate, you're going to see some guys. There's more chances for people to make mistakes, which is what I like about it.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I'm not too into the cash streets. I've played in the past, but it basically just switched over to GPPs now.
I mean, look, if you love to pick slimy bastards and you love to live that pivot life, GPPs are where it's at. And college football is the ultimate pivot game, because like there's just so many more guys who get into games than say in an NFL game. There'll literally be 8 to 10 receivers that some teams run out there. NFL, you'll see the same 3 receivers the whole damn game.
Yeah, you also run into some weird game script stuff. Like you'll have an Army-Navy game or some sort of Armed Forces Academy on the slate. Their total's 36.5. And then you'll have USC playing San Jose State where the total's 66. And then you'll have Clemson playing, I don't know, Boston College, and there's a 27.5 point spread, and then there's 3 other games that are spread within a field goal. So you'd have to manage a lot of different game environments. Whereas in the NFL, it's basically, all right, everyone's between a 45 and like a 50 total. Spreads generally aren't more than, like 10 to 14 points. So it does give you some interesting wrinkles trying to decipher who's actually going to be on the field for all those different teams in those game environments.
All right, let's talk about stacking. Specifically, are you more of a guy because if you're playing mainly GPPs, surely stacking is at least factored into your equation. Are you more of like a game stack kind of guy, or are you more of like, I like to go attack specific players? Or maybe you just want to team stack and play for blowouts, which I don't think that's always great because, like a big reason to not play Caleb Williams and USC in this first game is if San Jose State doesn't push him, Caleb Williams' ass ain't even going to be playing the fourth quarter, right? So when it comes to stacking, like, what is your belief in college football?
Yeah, I think generally it's a good practice. These are all like heuristics you should use, but nothing that's written in stone for you. For example, if you've got Malik Cunningham, a team that uses a severe like dual threat quarterback, I don't think you necessarily have to stack. And then it's about alternatives on slates too. If you've got like 4 games that have a 70-point total, maybe you don't need to quite fully game stack that one game that you're thinking about here. And then within the good games, I would say, to answer your question, I like targeting games more than specific players because I think it's easier to gain leverage. For USC, for example, if they're playing, I don't know, Arizona, totals around 70 points, it's going to be a shootout with USC favored by a couple scores. A lot of people are going to stack the popular players, Caleb Williams, Dorian Singer, whoever it may be. You could potentially gain some leverage there by playing a running back or maybe a third receiver, a tight end, whatever it is in that particular slate. So I'm still trying to take those avenues to the good games overall because we know Vegas totals, Vegas spreads, pretty accurate at this point. So getting leverage within them, I think, is where I would answer your question in the best approach.
Gotcha. Let's get out of these nerdy streets of just talking straight college football DFS, and let's just talk a little bit about general, just college football in general this year, either players or teams. Preferably, I would love you to say Dylan Gabriel and OU as your big breakout players this year, but I will allow you some freedom to go other places. So is there any teams or players, and you can just talk about how they're going to perform, win-loss record, or you can talk about how they might be breakout stars at DFS. Is there anybody you're kind of eyeballing this year that you think is just like in a nut position to have a breakout?
Yeah, I went pretty deep on this. I pulled one up for every Power 5 conference team and player. So I didn't know how deep you wanted to go.
Oh, let's go. Let's go all the way.
All right. I also kind of qualified this, not taking the elite teams like top 2 in terms of overall conference championship records. I guess with the Big 12, I think the biggest sleeper team there is UCF, making the jump from AAC competition over to Big 12 play. They recruited a pretty good level. They're 32nd in transfers, got a returning quarterback, really good receivers, 2 former, SEC guys in Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson. So I think they're a team that can overperform compared to expectations. And a player I'd look to there is Corey Gamage, the transfer coming over from Marshall. I think he's going to be a big part of this offense and provide a presence on the outside there. But I know you're an OU guy. How do you think they're going to fare?
Well, hey, they can be great. Just don't fucking beat my Sooners, okay? We need everyone we can get, all right? If we can't win 9 games this year, fucking let's just pack it up and go be a 5-7 team every year in the SEC for perpetuity.
Oh, man. Yeah, they got to win this year, don't they?
They do. It's a soft schedule. Soft. Baby shit soft.
It is nice, though. Hopefully they can actually make some noise with that.
Right. I mean, they need to go real off on 11-1 and preferably beat Texas and have the one loss be an upset. But whatever. By the way, who is your team? Are you just completely like agnostic when it comes to cheering for teams because of your career, or do you have a school you go for?
Kind of agnostic at this point. I went to Wisconsin. They've really pissed me off over the last couple of years with whatever they were trying to do on offense. I don't know, 1930s football.
Yep.
But now I'm excited with Longo coming over, Fickle coming over, the million transfers they got. They were actually the sleeper team I was going to talk about in the Big Ten. Big Ten's a really hard conference to talk about because you basically have the 3 juggernauts, and then whoever's going to face them in the West in that Big Ten championship, that's generally a blowout. But as far as like Big Ten teams go that it could overperform, I think Wisconsin's one of them. With Mordecai, I would look at Will Pauling, the Cincinnati transfer, as a sleeper slot receiver. But I cheer for Notre Dame. And then overall, like me and my buddies, we bet a bunch of games too. So generally about halfway through the year, we pick our team for the season that we're going to cheer for the rest of the way. And usually that just has to do with the team that's been the most profitable against the spread for us. Last year was TCU. The year prior was Coastal Carolina. So I got a bunch of merch from those two schools. Not sure who it's going to be yet.
Yeah, everyone always asks me who my favorite golfer is, and I'm always like, it's the guy who's definitely won me the most money, right? So like,
for sure.
I don't give a fuck. Like, I'm not like, oh, yeah, I like how he hits his approaches. He's cool. No, he won me a GPP once. I love that motherfather. That's my answer. Okay, did you you want to hit the other conferences real quick? We got a minute.
Yeah, we can do it. Well, I'll run through them. For the ACC, I think this is kind of a two-horse race here, too. So far as sleepers go, I'm avoiding Clemson and Florida State. Florida State, I think, would be your chalk answer. Maybe some people like Louisville because they play a really soft schedule, too. But I like Miami, top 10 in recruiting and transfers. You bring in completely new coaching staff aside from your head coach. He cleaned out both coordinators. Hopefully that can fix some of the mistakes that plagued Tyler Van Dyke last year. They have a lot of really young receivers. I'm really interested to see how they do. A couple 4-stars in Nathaniel Joseph, Robbie Washington. But I like Xavier Restrepo here as a sleeper. He flashed a lot on a small sample. He's a player I'd look for with Miami. They got a tough schedule, though. The Pac-12, I think, is just rife for sleeper potential. Arizona and Arizona State. I love that Arizona State named Jaden Rashada the elite recruit, their starting quarterback. I actually think it gives them upside. With Drew Pine under center, this team probably would have won like 4 games, 5 games. Rashada just being mobile, a dual threat, a 5-star freshman, basically. I think he opens the offense to potentially having some success there. They have a bunch of really good players. Badger's back. Sanders is back at receiver. You have Xavier Gulleroy from Idaho, I believe. It's either Idaho or Idaho State. FCS guy. Really productive. He'll come in and start for them. And I love Arizona. I mean, you remove Singer from the offense, but you still have DeLaura. Love Ted McMillan. Second-year player, former 4-star. I think he's going to fill in whatever role Dorian Singer is going to vacate here. Arizona's not going to be good on defense, so for those of you playing DFS, This is a team you definitely want.
That's what I was going to say. They're a great DFS team. You want Arizona in your DFS lineups, trust me. All they know is shootouts.
For sure. And then in the SEC, Ole Miss is a really interesting team to me. Basically had to portal their way receivers, but they got UTSA's Zachary Franklin. They play a relatively easy schedule. It's kind of, like barbell. You get a really easy team from the East and a really hard one. But I think people are going to focus their attention on Quinshon Judkins for good reason. But when this team has to air the ball, they have good weapons. You have 2 capable signal callers in Spencer Sanders, as well as Jackson Dart. I think people kind of just forgot about Michael Trigg. He had the injury, a little bit of suspension problems here, but this is a former really highly recruited tight end. He's basically a glorified slot receiver, just a big-bodied kid. He's going to play that sort of Kyle Pitts-like slot tight end hybrid role, which could be really useful for Ole Miss. I don't know if he's going to start. They also added Caden Prescorn at tight end, so it's really going to be interesting to see. But the kid has all the talent in the world, so I think he's definitely a sleeper.
Yeah, I got somebody who's obsessed with, was it Prescorn, whatever his name is.
Yeah, Memphis kid.
Always play him every week. That's what he'd always say. All right, man, I think that is everything. So I think there's 3 things I need people to know about my dude Matt here. First of all, the guy likes to bench press small cars for fun. Second of all, he does a show every week covering it. And if you're not watching his show covering the main slate for DraftKings, just admit you hate money and that you enjoy losing. If you admit those 2 things, you don't have to watch it. And number 3, he's over at Stochastic, and he's been over there. And it's weird for me to push other sites, but if there was ever another site I would go cheat on my own site with, it would definitely be Stochastic, just so I could see all the stuff that Matt offers. Matt, you want to tell us a little bit about everything that you're doing over there?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'd say to that is, subscribe to everyone you actually think is quality content. Like, you don't want just my opinion. You want to know what people are thinking, too, for ownership and what decisions you need to make. But yeah, I'm over at Stochastic. Break down every single slate. So there's going to be a video or a written update, usually both. I'm going to try to do both for every single slate this year, projections for every single slate. And you can find me on Twitter if you'd like, at Matt_Gajewski. Try to tweet out all that late news stuff. And if you have questions, DMs are open, always available. So feel free to shoot me one if you'd like to ask a question.
If they follow you on Twitter, will they get the occasional college football tilt tweet where somebody's out and you didn't know they were going to be out and you're going to slander somebody?
I used to be really bad at that. I'm trying to stop because I slandered the Wyoming beat reporter one time and I got banned. So now I'm trying not to get my Twitter account banned. It's my lifeline here. So I'm putting the brakes on slandering beat reporters.
Because a Wyoming beat writer put Matt in his place, noting that for future conversations. Matt, once again, thank you for coming on. It's going to be an awesome season. I wish you the best of luck, and let's just hope that college football DFS grows because it's only going to be great for you and I, right?
Thanks for having me, my man. I hope it grows too. Can't wait for what the season has in store, and best of luck to you as well. Thanks again for having me.
All right. Thanks, guys. All right. It is my third guest. You're probably thinking, can you please have somebody on that's not from the industry? Maybe just show me what a good player does and thinks about college football DFS, how they do it, why they do it, and how they're successful. Well, you're in luck because my next guy's his name's Kenny. Okay, you're going to know him as Hamhock41 over on DraftKings. And if you've been playing college football DFS and you look at GPP leaderboards and you haven't seen this guy, then you ain't motherfather looking. So, bringing in my guest now, Kenny, my dude, which, by the way, let's just go ahead and say, if that guy doesn't look like the most college football fan you've ever seen, you don't know what a college football fan looks like. What's up, brother?
Oh, not much. I decided to talk about some college football. Felt a little rusty yesterday, but knocked off the rust quick, and it was a pretty good day yesterday.
So I saw you last year because I know, we were just joking about how I got second place in a GPP last year, and of course you won because Maddox got robbed. But we're not going to debate that. But I just know you had a good season last year. I don't even need to ask you because of how frequently I saw you at the top of leaderboards. But here's what's crazy: we were talking yesterday, and it looks like you were already shipping GPPs on week 0 of this year. Are you already tearing it up on the early slate and the main slate yesterday?
It was awesome. I split on the early slate, the flagship GPP, split that, and then I think I won that. It was like the 180, won that yesterday, and then I won a college foot fantasy world championship seat last night.
Let's go.
I've been playing for 4 or 5 years, never won that, never made it. Been grinding for it every year, and then I get it week 0 this year.
Those things are so hard to win. Like those fantasy golf world championship tickets. Like every time I win one, I'm like, fucking, I have accomplished life, right? So like everybody thinks they're easy to win if you just throw money at them. They ain't, because it's basically an all or nothing, right? Like you win the ticket or you get like $5 for second place, which is just the ultimate kick in the dick. You already said something that sparked my interest, and it's one of the things I want to talk about because you said that you did well on that 2-game slate yesterday. Like, where do you find you have the most success? Is it a 2-game slate, a 5-game slate, a full 13-game slate? Like, what's your Goldilocks zone?
I don't know. Honestly, maybe like 8 games the best because it's like you have a nice variety of options, but you don't have to do like so much work cutting out of like a 14 gamer. You feel like you're maybe like cutting some people out that you normally like to play because you got to get it whittled down. I don't know. But I've always had the most success with 5 gamers, 2 gamers, like those greasy max slates. Like everybody hates. I love those. I love those. Anytime I can leave some salary off the board, and that's really all I got to do to get different. I love it.
I mean, first of all, if you don't love Maction, you don't love college football DFS. What the hell's wrong with you? You just said something I haven't brought up, and it's a very interesting point because I get asked this question all the time. How much salary is okay to leave on the table? You got to understand, I'm a golf guy, so leaving more than $500 on the table to me starts to seem really counterproductive. But at college football, which is just the ultimate variant sport with like fucking $3,000 receivers that nobody, what was that, Ashlock Pofili or whatever last night? Yeah. These motherfathers just go off, right? So how much, like on a given slate, let's just say a full slate, would you leave $1,000 on the table with a lineup?
Oh, 100%. I never on a main slate. Like usually there's so many options. The pricing's tight enough on a main slate, never. But I mean, yesterday, I think in the morning, I left up to 1,700 on the board and I took 200 off the top of every lineup. I made 49.8 my max and I wasn't using ownership caps. So that got me, got rid of those optimal lineups, lessened my chance of duping. But the way I kind of look at it, so, okay, you have like maybe a $3,200 guy that's projected for 12 points and a $4,800 guy that's projected for 10 points. Like you're probably going to want to get that $3,000 guy in there most of the time. So you want to be able to, like, if you're making a 150 lineup build, leave that 1,600 off. So you get down to that guy that's actually projected higher than the guy that's priced above him. So that's kind of that's like my guideline there. It's variant. Like I think I left up to 900 last night on the night slate on a 5-gamer, and pricing was super soft. You kind of could wiggle around and do whatever you wanted. But
so I think you've already answered this next question, and it's this: Are you a hand builder, or are you just a straight opto guy?
I got to use an optimizer now. It's hard for me to hand build now, and I used to think I could never use an optimizer, and now I can't go back to it. So.
And as a guy who we talked before, you are basically going pro with this. You've had so much success, you're going to just start making this your sole source of income. Are you a guy that makes your own projections and your own ownership? Like, because most of the pros are doing their own shit and not trusting other people's work. Is that something you do, or are you relying on others?
I definitely use a base source. I don't make my own projections. I make a lot of adjustments after I get my player pulled down, but I mean, I'm not that tech savvy. I'm sure it wouldn't be hard to learn, but it's I definitely rely on other people for that.
And when you're looking at those projections, what's more, I mean, obviously the answer is both of these things are important, but if you have to pick one, are you more of a like what their point projections is more important or what their ownership is? Because I know at PGA, I'm just like, fuck, it's all about ownership. Yeah. Okay. But at college football, those projections are sneaky important. So which one do you rely more on?
I think like college football, there's so much more like heavier chalk. Like PGA, it's going to be flat. Highest guy's own's going to be like mid-20s, where you could get on a main slate and a guy's like 75% owned, and you want to lock him. Like he's 25% under owned if he's not,
One of the most contentious points in college football DFS, all right? Super flex. 100% QB on a full slate or no? Okay, I know on some 2-game slates, sometimes we need to put a running back there, but on a main slate, are you just auto-locking a quarterback in your super flex?
99% of the time. Like, it's all slate dependent. And when I do go for running back on a main slate, like, it's for good running backs. They're usually high-owned, have a hellacious projection, or, maybe even a fifth wide receiver, fourth wide receiver. Like, the quarterback's got to be really shitty that week for me to not put 2 quarterbacks in every lineup.
Like a time split or something like that, or they just fucking barely throw the forward pass.
Exactly.
Okay, so so many people are getting into college football DFS. My goal is just to grow college football DFS, and with all these people getting in it, they don't understand the basics, right? A lot of them are coming over from NFL. So you play NFL DFS, I assume, right?
Yes. Yep, right. I do.
So, if you were to explain, what do you think is the biggest difference between NFL DFS and, college football DFS? Because for me, it's this. There's just so much more variance in college football DFS than there is in NFL DFS, right? You get more plays. You have more players. You have wilder outcomes. It's harder to predict. And so, with that, projections are much less reliable than they are for NFL. What would you say it is?
I don't know. I almost feel like it – like my process isn't that much different. Like I'm still correlation. I'm still trying to correlate everything. Football's that's my biggest thing in football is correlating. But I don't know, just with the differences in chalk from college to NFL. Like NFL is so much flatter. College, you're going to get those guys that are, super high owned. So I don't know. It's a different but same. I would say maybe college, you don't have to rely on correlation as much, even though I do. I stack or correlate just as much as.
Are you more of a game stacker or a team stacker? Whenever you're like last night, would you have just stacked Caleb Williams and the Trojans, or were you running it back with Chevron Cordero and people like that?
The USC, I wouldn't have ran back. I did run back Cordero with USC guys, though. Right. It's just all kind of game dependent how I'm doing my stacks. Some games I just I mini stack. For example, yesterday, Ohio. So they had that receiver that was out late, and I had to take him out, and I had him in a group to where I was like, if this Ohio receiver is in this lineup, I want him to have either the Ohio quarterback or a San Diego State run back. So I went and I clicked him out of that conditional player. And then my 150 build, it kept giving me those 1 to 3 players in all my lineups and took me forever to figure out. Never did. I ended up global swapping him. But
hey, free advice. Don't ever do content for a living because then you miss the Jacoby Jones news and you have him in 15% of your lineups because you're too busy fucking trying to help others and didn't even see the news. Doing an up to lock show. Well, that's great for everybody else, not for fucking me. Oops. One point that I need to see if you agree with, because I feel like I might be a bit of a contrarian here. I feel like the biggest difference between college football DFS and NFL DFS is chasing those ceilings is so much more important at college football. I don't worry about baseline projections as much as I worry about ceiling projections, especially for my GPP lineups, right? No fucking shit that when you're playing GPPs, you need the spike guys. And if you can get those guys, I played that Redmond guy from fucking whatever, UMass or whatever that got the couple touchdowns yesterday because I had him as a not great projections, but as a higher ceiling guy, and he got there with a couple touchdowns, right? And so, do you agree that in college football, chasing those ceiling rounds and GPPs, they're more likely to pay off than they are in NFL because NFL, there's just not enough plays and everything's so much more predictable.
A lot of chalk's driven by mispricing, so you're getting a $4,500 running back with a ton of volume. So, yeah, you're chasing those ceilings, but a lot of times those good plays are even better plays in college football as compared to NFL. I don't know, the best play on an NFL slate, I have no problem Xing that out. College, usually there's so many factors like a mispricing, volume that I'm still going to eat that chalk.
So here's a great question. For a guy that plays a lot of volume, what percentage of your weekly bankroll are you putting towards cash, which are your double ups, your head-to-heads, your 50-50s, and what percentage are you putting towards GPPs, your big contest? I know you know these terms, but the people watching may not know these terms.
I don't play any cash at all. I mean, I might college basketball. I never play cash. I play usually. I put a set of lineups in the flagship GPP, and then I have a single entry lineup. I put in every single entry, every GPP. I do that pretty much through all sports. You know, I have that one lineup in the qualifiers and the 555 and the $12 single entry, but I play zero cash.
So tell me your logic on not playing cash in college football, because I found it to be very, very. I mean, I got my dick kicked in on this week 0 because fucking I had some poor sources telling me Lockhart was warming up and was going to be playing, and he did not. And so but like last year was a very good year at cash. I mean, honestly, you just put in a solid lineup and let people make mistakes. And in college football, people are going to make mistakes. So why don't you play cash? I'm just curious.
I guess, I don't know. I like GPPs and I've had success with it, and I just kind of roll with it. I don't know. I'd rather have my volume in that than cash every week. I'm sure I could grind cash and do fine, but I don't know.
Hey, look, you don't need to defend your logic, because when it comes to PGA, people are like, if you know so much, just go play cash and beat half them idiots. Yeah. Well, I'm not. My mind doesn't work that way. I'm good at finding the dudes who are going to have nuclear rounds. This is why I love Showdown. This is why I love GPPs at week long, because I'm not fucking thinking about cash. I don't want a guy who's going to go finish T40. Fuck that shit. Yeah. So I get having a mind that's more like GPP centric than cash centric. I really do. Like, it makes a lot of sense to me. All right, just a general question. Do you think that college football DFS is going to grow? Like, I just want to believe this. So if I just get enough people to tell me yes, maybe it'll happen. Okay.
You know, I don't know. I don't think so. I did see they posted contests for Thursday and Saturday, and that, like, Saturday's main GPP is really nice. They're definitely making the fantasy football or college fantasy football championship bigger. But I just think with the states being limited, and I think people get soured out on the late news and their guys not playing. Like, that's such a kick in the nuts. And if you haven't dealt with it for a long time, it is tilting. Like, it's like, I'm so used to it now. I expect it. You're the same way, I'm sure. But I think that kind of burns people out a lot. All
I have to remind myself is this. First of all, the biggest thing you got to remember is that news, sometimes it's going to fuck you like it did for me yesterday, but then just as much as it's going to help you. There's going to be some GPP this year where a guy's going to be 60% owned that I fade, and literally he'll just not play, right? Or get hurt on the first play, and it'll all flip, right? So, like, I understand that. And then the other thing with the news is if you're hearing anything that makes somebody questionable, you could just make a rule and just say, fuck it, I'm never playing them. That could be a rule that you have, and that will save you a lot of tilting of balls, right?
That's fair. I
mean, I don't know if that's the best rule, because sometimes you can get mega leverage on a guy that people are overreacting to an injury. But in cash, I just, that I have nobody to blame but myself for trusting sources that, he's warming up and he's going to play. Okay, well, he didn't fucking play, so go fuck yourself, guy in California whose friend was at the game.
Yeah, it's like, that's why it's like, I feel like it's important to, like, you're managing your college football DFS all Saturday. If you're playing one lineup, you still got to check every lock, make sure your guys are in. So, always play something manageable, because stuff changes so much. And like me, now that I'm doing 100 lineups, I know how to rebuild, late swap, do all that, do it quick. I've went through it a few times, but I've definitely gotten overwhelmed with lineups on a Saturday, and there's injury news, and I'm like, how am I going to fix all this or, change all this? And I end up just putting in a bunch of random people or global swapping to one guy, or, so definitely do what you can manage for sure on a Saturday.
So I can't imagine there's too many people that are college football DFS pros. And as a man who has the track record to do it and is going to attempt it, I think you would be the best person to answer this question. With so many, I would like to think so many new people getting into college football DFS. If you could just give them one piece of advice, like to either help them be successful, but more than that, to just quit stepping on their own dick, like, what would you advise them to do? Because I think coming from you, it's going to hit a little bit different.
I mean, honestly, what I just kind of said, like, definitely, like, have a game plan on Saturday. And I think it's important to, like, attack DFS long-term instead of, like, this week I'm going to enter the $20, next week I'm going to enter $4 or $5 lineups. Like, set your goal for the season, try to stick to it, try to not go over it, try to not go under it. Obviously, contest sizes and entry fees will change, but try to keep the same goal and then have a game plan that you can manage. And, I mean, keep listening to, like, great people like you or other content providers that but I mean, there's so many sharp people and so much good info now for college football compared to there was when I started. So yeah, those would be the three things. Like, definitely get a good content source, Yep. That's helpful. Even for me, like, there's so much news and stuff, like you cannot keep track of it all yourself.
You can't. And if you want to tell yourself you can, you're just lying to yourself. You need to have a network and a community of people that do it. All right, let's get a little bit off DFS and just talk college football in general. If you got any hot takes this year on any teams or players that are going to have big breakouts, and don't you cheat and say somebody that already played on week 0 because we already saw those games.
I don't know. I honestly hadn't really looked into the season as a whole until like Friday when I started looking at the DFS slate. But I don't know. I'm hoping maybe my Huskers maybe will throw in 3 or 4 games. That might be a bold prediction. I did bet South Alabama over 8 wins. They're returning a ton. And I thought, I don't know, that's the one bet that stuck out to me this year. I guess I don't really have any predictions. I just think it's super interesting to like Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, all are having a new quarterback this year. And now so it's 2023. Finally, some of these guys that have 6-year eligibility because of COVID are finally leaving. So I feel like we're getting more new faces this year than we've gotten the last 2 or 3 years. Whittling out those 5th and 6th year guys, or 6th and 7th now. I think that quarterback for Jacksonville State last night was his 7th year of eligibility this year.
COVID fucked some shit up. It made things weird. All right, final question, and this is important to me. I think Hamhock is one of the greatest screen names I've ever seen on DK. Can you give any background on that? I would love to know the why that name is your avatar name.
To be completely honest, 7th grade, a kid called me Hamhock in gym class, and I just ran with it. I mean, it's my my username for everything. So, or at least that the Hamhock part, the number might be different.
Here's a good rule. Here's a good rule of thumb. If I ever meet a guy and like I heard he wants to fight me, and then I find out his name's Hamhock, I don't want any part of it. I don't want to get into fucking throwing knucks with a guy named Hamhock. That's not you do not fuck with men named Hamhock, right? All right. I appreciate you coming on. I look forward to staying in touch with you this season. I hope that maybe once this year you get to see me right on top of you on a leaderboard. But, I mean, I based on what we saw last year, maybe not. And I hope to are you already counting the $50,000 you're going to win next Saturday in the main $20 GPP?
Oh, I wish.
Have you already spent that money?
That's probably my new goal for this year is to win that main event GPP on Saturday because I've never done that, and that is a tough sucker to win.
If they're going to keep putting out contests like that where it's 20% to first, it's actually practical to max it, right? Like this last weekend we had a third to first, and like if you're not legit, like if you max enter that, which was $15, so $22.50 outside of finishing in the top 5, you're legit going to lose every single slate, and that shit adds up. Right?
It does.
And so at least when they do 20% to first, there's a good, finish in the top 10, you probably could break even and, have a lot of lineups out there. You can have a winning week, and it gives you the chance to spike that once a year 50,000 or something like that, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's a grind. It's not just done in 1 week.
Yeah, I mean that's what I keep reminding myself. Even on a week like this week, where I was down a week, I only lost. I got about a third of my money back. And when you can kind of cut your losses like that and not lose everything you bought in, that one big week is going to get back all those little losses and get you back. And I think if people just realize that you're going to lose most weeks, it would stop tilting their ball so much, and they'd have so much more fun with it. Flesh wound, flesh wound, flesh wound, flesh wound. Fucking spike a monster and you're good. Right? That's the only way I know how to play.
Yep. Same here.
All right.
My DFS balls are like huge right now compared to where they were 2 weeks ago. They were pebbles 2 weeks ago. Now had a hell of a couple weeks, and now I think I know everything. So.
All right, you Nebraska farm boy. I look forward to seeing you up there and staying in touch. Thank you for your time. It has been real. Do you want to tell the people your Twitter or anything where they can follow you?
I know it's going to shock you. Hamhock41.
Let's go.
Is also my tweet handle, so pretty simple to remember.
And you're not doing any content, right? You're just a
no. I mean, I don't post anything. I guess informative. Just I don't know, whatever comes to my mind once in a while. So.
And there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. I appreciate all my guests coming on. They gave some great insights and are going to help you become better college football DFS players. If you want to, make sure to go give them a follow on Twitter. Make sure to like this video and make sure to continue to watch everything we're going to be doing for college football this year. And check out djn75.com. We have the best college football content out there. Enjoy your week, you mother fathers.